All right, this video is my wrap up for the first week of my Read What You Own challenge. So for my Read What You Own challenge, I'm reading 75 books I already own before I buy any more. And the reason I'm doing that is because I buy more books than I can read, and I need to change that. So this week I had 2 DNFs and I had one absolute winner, and I'm going to talk about the winner. And that book is this, Whatever Kills the Pain by C.W. Blackwell. This is a collection of short stories, very much in the crime noir gritlit vein, more in the gritlit than in the crime vein, but it's definitely also noir. And when I say noir, I mean morally ambiguous characters operating kind of in the margins or the underbelly of society, often kind of on some kind of quest for some kind of justice. Whether it's right or wrong is kind of irrelevant, but they're on some kind of quest for that. And these stories were just absolutely great. It really blew me away. Reminded me a lot of Jordan Harper. Reminded me a lot of Larry Brown and Ron Rash. Also like Bonnie Jo Campbell. So if you're a fan of the kind of like Appalachian noir or country noir or grit lit, there's a lot of different tags that are associated with this kind of writing. Larry Brown, I think I may have mentioned that already. Just really great stuff, really powerfully written. I don't know how I've never heard of this guy before. I learned about his book through Instagram, I think through Jordan Harper's Instagram account. I can't remember, but it kind of kept popping up on some Instagram accounts of people sharing it. And the title blew me away, Whatever Kills the Pain. I mean, that's a great title. You know, and the cover blew me away. It's a great cover, and it popped up on Amazon and it was on sale. So I thought, okay, I'll try it. Fantastic stuff. Just so well written. It's not hard-boiled crime noir writing, so don't let that turn you off. It's very much literary writing. It's very much written in a literary vein. However, you know, the stories are really gritty stories. They're stories of real people. Some of it is a bit preposterous, a little bit crazy, but it's kind of cool stuff. I'm thinking, for example, there's one story of some farmers who really get into some bad debt with a local bank, and they learn about how rich the family who owns the bank has become and how they've been rich just like beyond their dreams for generations. So the farmers just decide to occupy the bank, and the police call in a guy who kind of instigated this whole thing, but has been in hiding, and they're hoping that he can turn the tide. And he says, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll go in and help you out. I'll talk him out of it, and we'll get this whole thing solved." And he goes in, and of course he joins the farmers. And so there's a lot of like stories of like the underdogs, which I really, really liked. And there's some really surprising twists. That story is a great example where you think like he's going to actually like talk the farmers out of it, and there'll be some sort of like, you know, reconciliation or things like that. But he just decides at the drop of a dime that, nah, I'm with the farmers. We're going to burn this bank down. You know, it's actually a really great story. There's some really sad, some really touching stories too. There's a story of a father who has a drinking problem, and he kills someone in a hit and run, and he goes on the run and he leaves his family, and he ends up going back to the resort where I can't remember if it's where he proposed or where he met his wife or where they went on their honeymoon. Anyways, he kind of locks himself into the bar, gets himself drunk, gets himself kind of into a hostage situation, and just kind of ends up knowing how he's gonna get himself killed by the police, rather than it's kind of going the direction where he might take his own life, but he decides to just create a situation where the police are just going to have to shoot him and kill him. So a bit grim, I guess, now that I talk about that, but the stories are written in a really touching way with some really touching language. And I have to say, C.W. Blackwell, very, very gifted writer, and I'm definitely going to have to search out more of his stuff. So highly recommend this collection of short stories. It's written really well, really fast paced writing. I read the whole book, I think in maybe 2 or 3 hours. And it's it's a decent sized collection. It's about 200 pages or 250 pages, something like that. So definitely worth checking out. And it's definitely renewed my interest in more of the country noir and more of the sort of grit lit, which is great because I've got tons of that stuff on my Kindle and ready to go. I don't have much of that stuff on my shelf because that stuff is kind of hard to find here in Shanghai. The two books that I DNF'd are The Drowned World by J.G. Ballard and another J.G. Ballard that I had tried to read, Supercon. I'm not going to get rid of these books. They're not bad books. I'm just not quite in the frame of mind to read them right now. They're both very intriguing. The Drowned World is set in, I think it's set in London, and it's sort of in a climate crisis, and the city's been flooded. Most of Europe is flooded. I didn't get too far into it. It has some kind of interesting, weird stuff in it. That's almost like the world has kind of gone back into some sort of like prehistoric state. So there's like huge reptiles around and things like that. But just didn't quite click with me, largely because I think the last book I had read before that is a little similar, called Doggerland. I did a video about that before. Again, another sort of climate novel in which much of the world has been flooded. And I just felt like needed something different. So then I tried Supercon by J.G. Ballard. And it's an interesting premise. I'm going to hang on to it and try to come back to it again when I'm more in the mood for this type of fiction, this type of speculative fiction. This one is set in a city in France that's kind of this like super startup tech grind kind of city. And it looks very interesting and it's very prescient. I think about sort of grind culture and 21st century tech corporate culture and the sort of cultish nature behind that culture. But there's a kind of distance in J.G. Ballard's writing that I have found a little bit hard to close the gap with necessarily. And that's really just more related to kind of my headspace right now. I'm more interested in deeper characterization and deeper character development rather than these sort of larger architected kind of meta stories that you find in speculative fiction and in science fiction. So I know these are the better J.G. Ballard books. I'm going to hang on to them. They're not bad books. I'm not putting them down in any way, just not really in the headspace for it. So I have also started another collection of short stories called Pills and Poachers. Is it Pills and, oh, I'm sorry, Poachers and Pills by J.D. Clapp. Sorry, I've got that here on my Kindle. I also read Whatever Kills the Pain on my Kindle. I've got a ton of books on my Kindle that are unread. This is more grit lit, kind of rural noir. J.D. Clapp is completely unknown to me. I need to do a little bit of figuring out about who he is. But this is another writer and another book I have found through Instagram. So I seem to have kind of tapped into some kind of pipeline for finding good writers on Instagram. So it's definitely something that you should check out. I've got a video that should be out already, or it should be coming soon, about how I find books. And one of the ways I talk about is finding books and writers on Instagram. So you might want to check that out. If that's out already, I'll put a link to it below. But anyway, so this is just a quick video wrap up. Nothing crazy or in-depth here. Just talking about my first week with the Read What You Own challenge. If you haven't done this challenge, I'd really recommend it to you. This is my second time doing it. I failed the first time, but I'm going to stick with it this time. I really recommend it. I think it's great to I've been surprised looking at the books that I haven't read on this shelf and even more on my Kindle. I'm actually kind of embarrassed and ashamed by about how much I have that I haven't read, but that I need to read. And I buy good books. I rarely buy books that I don't like or don't want. So it just makes sense to read them. So there you go. Not much else to say in this video. In case you don't know, my name's Carl, and this has been Please Read Your Book.